Hey folks, welcome back. Tonight we're going to talk about the 10-speed transmission that's behind the 7.3 Godzilla. There's a lot of chatter out there, some complaints. We're going to go over those, and we're going to talk about what the 10-speed does well. A lot of what we don't hear is what it does well. So we're going to go over some of the complaints and kind of talk about maybe something you can do to remedy a little bit of the problem yourself, just in how you're operating the vehicle. So the first complaint is going to be that the truck jumps on startup. So on a cold start, the truck's been sitting for an hour, maybe overnight, whatever. um, let's say you're even standing outside the truck and you hit the remote start, and you can hear this big clack, and the truck literally jumps in park. It moves a couple of inches, and it might move backwards or it might move forwards depending on what gear you were in the last time before you placed it in park. So what I like to do with mine, what I learned to do very early on with it, is when I park the vehicle, I get it where I'm going to be, I stop, I place the truck in neutral. So I take all the load off the drivetrain. Then I set my parking brake. Once the truck is completely settled and the parking brake is set, then I put it in park. Now when I start my truck, it's not going to jump because there's no preload on the drivetrain, forward or reverse. The next thing is how much these trucks jump when you throw them in gear. When you first start the truck, high idle, one thing you just cannot do with these trucks, and it's taken me a while to break the habit. We all have the habit. We're in a hurry. We jump in, start the truck, slam it in gear. That's not good for any vehicle, but it's really hard on these. They make a lot of torque, and when your idle's up over 12, 1300 RPMs and you just drop it and drive, it's going to jump. So one thing I've, again, tried to do, my parking brake is set. I start the truck up, I get in, and I wait until the RPMs are down to, say, 1,000 or less. Now, my truck hasn't been started since yesterday, so I'm going to show you that here in just a minute. And I'll get a nice smooth engagement of drive when I go to put it in gear. So I'll start it, let the RPMs come down. If they're not coming down fast enough, I'll go to neutral. If I am in a hurry, I'll go ahead and go to neutral. And believe it or not, that actually does bring them down. So I don't know what it tells the computer or whatever, but apparently it tells it, hey, we're not in park anymore. It's time to bring the idle down, and it'll bring the idle down for you a little bit. Then you can go to drive, nice smooth engagement, and you're off and running. So we'll show you that. Then we're going to go for a little drive, and we'll talk about a couple other things. Okay, I do apologize about the glare, but hopefully once I start it, you'll see everything okay. So we're going to fire up the truck. There's our RPM. She's around 12, 1300 right now. And you can see the RPM slowly starting to come down. It's only been running for a few seconds. It's already dropped just a tick. I can almost hear the fan when it starts to slow down before I even see the tach move. So there it's starting to drop. So there's 1,000. I'm going to go ahead and go to neutral. So there's neutral. And now I'm going to go into drive. It was a nice smooth engagement. Now, of course, it is beeping at me because my parking brake is set. But there, we're off and running. So that's tip number one for you to kind of get rid of that harsh engagement on startup. Okay, so we're talking about problems with the 10-speed transmission. We've talked about setting the parking brake and put it in neutral when you park, and we've talked about letting the the RPMs come down there before you put it in gear. That kind of gets rid of a couple of those little quirky things, very simple things you can do to remedy it. Let's talk about hunting for gears. That's one of the huge number one big complaints about these, is the hunting for gears scenario. And I've experienced that a little bit myself. I think we all have at some point or another. And it seems to happen more at low speeds and like light throttle position. I haven't encountered it a whole awful lot when I'm driving, highway speeds, or, I'm getting after a little bit, accelerating a little harder. One thing I'll say is I've noticed the truck seems to shift better um, when I have a load behind it or when I'm working it. So those light throttle positions, especially when the truck's cold, can tend to exaggerate some of that um, getting lost and hunting for gears scenario. But one thing I kind of attribute to some of those issues is the no throttle cable. So it's drive by wire. There's a sensor on your accelerator, and it talks to the computer, and the computer talks to a little actuator under the hood, and that opens and closes your throttle for you. So you've got a delay in there, right? You step on the pedal a little bit, and the computer has to relay that information. That little servo motor's got to move. So if you're at a light throttle and the truck is thinking, okay, the driver's not giving me a lot of throttle input, I can probably go ahead and shift because they're not accelerating hard anymore. So it goes to shift, let's say third from first, and then all of a sudden you change your throttle position and it says, oh, wait a minute, now we've got to downshift again. So I think a lot of it has to do with just, the computer is causing a lot of these issues. It's not necessarily hardware, an actual transmission failure. Now, don't get me wrong, there could be. I'm sure there are bad transmissions out there. Um, there's people that need the transmission replaced and what have you. But I think a vast majority of us can probably relate to that, feeling lost and feeling more of like an electronic or a programming issue. I know there's aftermarket tunes you can get. When my truck's out of warranty, I might look into one of those, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my extended warranty and take a chance on, something unrelated, not even transmission related, but anything going wrong where my dealership could come back and say, well, you voided your extended warranty because, you put this tune in your truck. So for right now, I'm just trying to do what I can with the vehicle um, to make it work better for me without making any modifications to the program or tune. So, um, another thing we can do with the hunting for gears is locking out gears. So, I'll show you a little clip here that I recorded the other day driving in a mobile home community where I was driving extremely low speeds. And so I just locked out like all my gears except first, second, and third. Purple Collar Life is a channel, another YouTube channel that I follow, and he has commented about the hunting for gear scenario when he's towing his travel trailer or fifth wheel in a campground at those low speeds and having that hunting for gear scenario between first and fourth gear. So my recommendation in that scenario, what I do when I'm in the campground with my trailer, I go to manual mode and I put it in the gear I want it to be in. Now, it'll downshift, and you'll see that in this little clip I'm going to show you here in a minute too. It will downshift, but it won't upshift. So if you lock it in manual 3, it'll still downshift to 2 and then 1, or straight to 1 in most cases, and then it's just not going to upshift until you tell it to. So those are two things that I do that help kind of eliminate some of that hunting for gears. Like right now, I'm cruising 15 mile an hour. I've got every gear locked out except 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, I'm not going to let it get crazy grabbing gears. These things will go up into 10th gear at like 40 mile an hour. There's just no need for it to be in that high a gear at that speed. You're just asking for it to shift more and cause drivability issues. So I'm going to cut to that other clip here for a minute and show you those examples, and I'll be right back. All right, so right now is a perfect example of the scenario I was talking about. I just pulled into a mobile home community here. This is a perfect example of an area where I'm going to just lock out a whole bunch of gears, right? I'm slow speeds. I'm going to take it all the way down to third gear. That's all I'm going to let it have is 1 through 3. There's no need to, have any more gears than that, because I'm not going that fast. It doesn't need to be shifting. And if I let it, there's a chance that it would try to get into 4th or maybe even 5th, and then it's just that many extra shifts, right? It's not like I'm going to drive hundreds of miles in 3rd gear. So there we are, we're in 3rd, and we're not even doing 15 miles an hour, and it's already shifted into 3rd, and I'm stopping. So here's a downshift, and we're back to 1st. So this is just one of those scenarios where, okay, so there it did the skip shift, right? Ford's famous for that, which, if you think about it again, it's got a pretty gradual step. Not a lot of RPM difference between 1st and 2nd. So as long as you're not pulling a load and the truck can sense that, it's probably going to skip 2nd gear and go 1 to 3, and then 3 to 5, and then after that it's going to use every gear available to it that's not locked out. So anyway, this is just a quick example for you of where it benefits to lock out those gears at low speeds. Now what I'll do here is I'll pull it down into manual and try to hold this in here, and I'm going to come to a stop, and you'll see that it goes manual 3 all the way down to manual 1. But now we're in manual. It's not going to shift until I tell it to. So manual 1st, it's going to stay in 1st gear. So again, towing through a campground, maybe you put it in manual and you shift to 2nd. We're doing 15. Most campgrounds, the speed limit in a campground is 10 to 15. So, why leave it in drive and let it try to shift on you and cause all that frustration? Just either lock out those gears or manually put it in 2nd. And again, if you come to a stop with your trailer on, it'll downshift. It's going to downshift into 1st. And then when you take off again, you can go ahead and just bump that shifter up to 2nd gear and stay there. Okay, so you got to see the clip there of the demonstration of locking out gears and using manual mode. I actually drive in manual a lot when I'm towing. On the highway, I will usually try to run 7th gear. So I've got the 373, and I'll run 7th gear, which is my direct drive 1-to-1. And that's a pretty happy gear for me to be towing in. 65 mile an hour, 2,500 RPM, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. If the road's really flat, I can get into 8th. I'm never going to let it use 9 and 10 because the minute it gets into 9 or 10, it's probably going to be on a downhill anyway, and it's just going to turn around and downshift the minute I hit the flat or start to go up a little grade. So I definitely always lock out 9 and 10 when I'm driving, if I'm leaving it in drive. The other thing with the getting lost looking for gears, and I think most of us that used to drive diesels will relate to this. When you drove a diesel, you used to roll into the throttle, right? You take off from a dead stop, and you wouldn't necessarily snap the throttle. At least I didn't. I would roll into it, and so I would slowly press the pedal down as I was accelerating. It had a mechanical cable. I could do that. These vehicles with that sensor, that drive-by-wire software, they don't like that. At least my truck doesn't. It hates when I roll into the throttle like that. Now, if you put it in manual and you manually shift, you can roll into that throttle like that. But if it's in drive and you roll into the throttle, it's probably going to get lost. Causes that whole hunting for gears scenario to take place. So yeah, that's another one. Don't roll into the throttle. If your truck's already to the point that it's doing these things, it's acting up, you might want to consider taking it into the dealership and having them do a relearn on your transmission for you. So they'll erase the memory essentially in your transmission programming in the computer there, and it'll basically start over from new again, and then you have the opportunity to go and retrain it to shift the way you want. So I actually trained my truck. I knew I was going to be dealing with these problems. I've had these issues with the drive-by-wire scenario and the self-learning transmissions before, and they weren't even Ford. But what I did to kind of teach my transmission was to take off as aggressively as I could without, spinning the tires or turning them over at all. Not that I want to tear out or take off just as fast as I possibly can, but accelerate moderately. We'll say moderate. Um, Take off, let things happen the way they want to happen, right? Drive it in normal mode, in drive. Don't do anything. Just let the transmission do what it's going to do. Hold that accelerator as steady as possible. So take off, maybe quarter throttle, whatever it is you're going to do. Hold the pedal there. Try not to move it. Let the engine wind out to whatever RPM it's going to wind out to in that gear and shift. Do that for a couple weeks. Drive it that way. Then I turned around and I used eco mode for a couple weeks, and I did the exact same thing, except now I was light on my throttle. I was accelerating lightly, but again, I would hold that steady pedal. And I can honestly say I think that made a difference. My transmission, it gets lost once in a great while, but I can almost always point the finger right at me and go, yep, I let off, and then I got back in the gas and it got confused. Uh, if I'm steady on that pedal, it usually does a pretty good job at doing what I want it to do. Okay, so I think that about covers it, from what I've got in my notes about, what the negatives are, what the 10 speed does bad. Um, let's talk about what the 10 speed does good. Uh, I think this 10 speed is a game changer for towing. My old truck was an '04 Dodge Ram with a Cummins in it, and I had 373 gear in that, so same gear that's in this truck, same size tires, and I feel that this truck towing my fifth wheel gets off the line better and gets up to speed faster than the Dodge would. The Dodge only had that 4-speed transmission. So this transmission, the 10-speed, first gear and second gear are both lower than first gear was in the Dodge. So I have to get all the way to third gear in this truck before I'm in an equivalent gear to what first was in my Dodge. So the 10-speed, regardless of what gear ratio you have, whether it's the 355, the 373, or the 430, it makes up a lot of ground for you. So in a 355 or a 373 gear truck, that 10 speed is helping you on the low end tremendously, giving you more torque on the bottom end to get going. Now, if you're a 430 guy, you've got even more torque on the low end, right? Because that 430 is a torque multiplier, and it's going to help you even more. Where the 10 speed helps you guys is at the top end. If you think back to, I don't know, let's say 2005 Chevy 3/4 ton HD with the 6-liter, had a 410 gear in it from the factory, and if you were running, I think they had 4-speed transmissions in them. If you were running 70 to 75 mile an hour down the highway, you were turning 2,500 RPMs. And that's no joke. I mean, I rode in a former supervisor of mine's truck, and that was exactly what it was doing. I mean, 2,500 all day, doing 70 to 75 on the highway. And I'm thinking, wow, I don't like that. I don't want to work an engine like that all day with no load behind it. I mean, don't get me wrong, 2,500 is not a bad RPM, but why put all that wear and tear on your engine if you don't need to be spinning it that fast? So that's where the 10 speed helps you 430 guys, because you've got this great big gear, really low, and most of them are still running at 70, in that 1900 to 2000 range. That's pretty impressive for that low of a gear to run that low of an RPM at a highway speed. Now, they're going to start using a little more fuel than I am when they get above 70, but let's face facts, we're all going to use more fuel when we get above 70. We're driving something as aerodynamic as a brick. But the case is, you are going to turn a few more RPMs with, the 430 over the 373 or the 355. So, but again, we're talking about the 10 speed and what it does well. So I don't want to necessarily get too much into the debation of gears again, but yeah, so that's, again, what it does well. It makes up on the top end for the 430 guys, and it does a great job on the low end for us 373 and 355 guys. The other thing it does really well is the manual shifting, the ability to lock those gears out. I started driving in the early 90s. I grew up in the 80s, and overdrives were just coming out in the automatics, and you always heard, don't drive in overdrive in town, don't drive in overdrive when you're towing. So I'm used to driving in a lower gear and not letting my vehicle have overdrive when I'm towing and when I'm driving through town. I mean, back then it was a pain, right? You had to pull the gear shift down. So if you just came off the highway or something and you come to a stop, you got to pull that gear shift down to pull it into drive so it wasn't going into overdrive at low speeds. These trucks with a push button, it's so easy. Now the Ford 6-speed prior to this 10-speed did the same thing. You could lock out gears and manually shift with a push button. I just think it's something that they do really well, and I use it quite a bit. Like I said earlier, I manually shift mine quite a bit. Now I'm not downshifting it. Most of the time, I'm only using it to control maybe 6, 7, and 8 on the highway when I'm towing. Let's say I'm wanting to run in 7th, I'll manual shift. Once I reach 7th, I'll go to manual. I'll lock in, I'll be locked into 7. If I see a big hill coming, I can pop it down a gear into 6 before I ever hit the hill, and I motor right up it. Now, if I leave it in drive and just lock out gears down to 7, it's probably going to downshift, especially if I've got my cruise control set. It's going to downshift like down into 5th because the cruise will wait until you've lost a few miles an hour, and then it wants to make it up really fast. So she'll drop 2 gears on you, where if you're manually shifting, you can control that a little better and just give it 1 gear right before the hill, and you'll take care of that. That problem will just kind of take care of itself. So yeah, that's kind of in a nutshell the do's and don'ts, I guess you could call it, with the 10 speed. It's an imperfect world, and these transmissions aren't any different than anything else. They're not perfect, but if those little tips help you out and make your ownership of your truck and the drivability a more pleasurable experience for you, great. I'm glad I could help you out. It's what I do, and it seems to work for me. So all right, well, that's going to be it for this one. I know these videos are reaching people by the comments I'm getting on the previous videos, so I'm going to keep making them, keep putting information out there. I love being able to help people out. I've gotten help in the past from other people's videos, so it's always nice to return the favor. Probably going to do a couple videos here in the near future on some upgrades that I've done to the truck, just lighting stuff, light bar, Morimoto headlights on the front, and the auxiliary lights on the back. They're not really reverse lights because I did wire them to an upfitter switch, so I can turn them on whenever I want. But yeah, so if you like that kind of stuff and you're interested, maybe hit that subscribe and hit the notification bell, and then you'll get notified when I post another video. But again, thanks for coming along. I appreciate you sticking with me. Thanks for watching.